And so as I have conversations with people about their death and what they want to do with their body afterwards, or people say, well, I'd like to give it to science. Can I do that? Of course you can. Wonderful. Methodism has long been about education and development and understanding things. Even our founder, John Wesley, yes, do that.
If one's own body in death can bring some benefit to human beings, that's considered a final act of blessing or of offering to the humans who remain behind. And so if a body dedicated to science offers up organs and other body parts that can be used for study, that will help reduce suffering in other human beings or perhaps even extend their lifespan, then that's considered a beneficial offering.
We definitely could learn something if we meet someone before they pass away and then are able to study their body once they've died. I think that's one of the key pieces that's really missing from the way that we study corpses now. We are left with the end result of a puzzle, which we can start to put together, but the body is so extremely unusual and extremely unknown to us that we just can't get the total puzzle put together without more information. And even now, even if you did have a chance to meet someone before they passed away, before you could study them, there's still pieces that you would be missing. So to have a more complete picture, I think it's an excellent idea to really get to know the person's lifestyle and how they lived, so that you can know why they died and how their body stopped working.
The idea of that I've just learned about, of a woman who studies the person in their life and talks to that person and comes to know that person, and then does scientific work with their body, touches me a lot. I think that that's part of the sense of continuity between life and death. It recognizes that we're not just what's left behind.
Eyes on Longmont, offering a diversity of topics about our community that will inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy this edition of Eyes on Longmont.
Well, we're both massage therapists, and we came together several years ago to be able to study the human body. We just kind of happened to meet, but at that time we really had a connection, and we both have this insatiable curiosity about the human body, and that's why we want to study cadavers, is because there's nothing like the reality of what you're actually being presented with. Because books are the same no matter, but when you see an individual, they're all very different. So the value in learning how to touch different tissue is what the lab presents for us, is that tissue palpation from individual history. So the only obstacles really that we came across were zoning, being able to find a place that would accept both an institute and a medical facility, and then because people get a little weirded out, I guess, for having cadavers around, we had to make sure that all of the neighbors were comfortable with it. Because one time I did rent a space, and before we were able to finish up the contract, they sold the strip mall. And the new guy that bought it kicked me out. He tore up my check and gave me back my lease and everything, because he didn't want a cadaver lab in the strip mall. So I know that there are people that kind of wonder about that kind of facility.
We have a lot of individuals that come in here who are uncomfortable with the whole idea of death. And of course the cadaver is the ultimate example of that. I mean, you're touching and you're seeing and you're smelling death right there. And so a lot of the times those individuals will be the people that stand back. They're at arm's length or even further to begin with. But then as we start this exploration with the cadaver, talking over the cadaver, talking about who this person was and what it is that we're seeing and how that correlates, you can see the person slowly be drawn in. They physically move closer, and then eventually they ask for that permission. Can I touch that? And they touch that structure that we're looking at and whatnot, and all of a sudden all that barrier breaks down and they really become intimately involved with the cadaver and with that learning process. Whereas before you could just see that, yeah, I want to be back here. And this is everything from professionals that have never had that experience to high school kids that we've had come in here with small classes, and it's typically a girl or two that stand back, but before you know it, they're in front, and they're in fact in front of everybody else.
We realized it was honestly bigger than the two of us, and it wasn't about us making money, it was about us sharing and being able to have a facility where others like us or other practitioners could come and they could learn just like we are. And what we do is we take it back every week and we apply it to our clients that we're working with. So Science Care is a for-profit company, and when we receive a body from Science Care, we receive a little bit of history on the person. We receive the information as far as their age, what they died of, and maybe some of their social activities. But we don't really receive a whole lot of history, so when we're discovering and uncovering the cadaver, we start to hypothesize what we think the person went through. And so one of our cadavers had a split sciatic nerve. Well, he died at 56. He had cirrhosis of the liver. So we can hypothesize that maybe the pain in his pelvis, maybe he self-medicated with alcohol, and that was to his demise. He was only 56, but we can only hypothesize that. What we have done is we've worked towards our own donor program, where people now can directly donate their bodies to us. And I have personally we both have sat in people's living rooms and talked to them about what it means to be a donor to our lab, and what can we learn from them where they're alive, and what can we learn from their lifestyle, that when we go to work and dissect that body, can we bring that lifestyle into the adaptations that we see within their body. And that is going to be one of the key things, I think, in really understanding what we do have instead of making up things and hypothesizing.
I received something in the mail asking for a body donation to Science. And after I informed myself about the viability of my organs as far as donating them, I thought, well, if they're not up to par to do somebody some good, then the next best thing would be to donate to someone that could do some research and find out all sorts of things as far as why is my heart good and my lungs bad, or my bones, or my tissue, or all the different things that are very viable for science and for study and for young doctors to know, and even if they have to do a cut and sew it back up so that they know they're doing it right, before they do it with somebody that's alive and wants to stay alive. So to me, that's a good cause to do something after I'm gone that would benefit future doctors, medical students, nurses, whomever,
One of the cadavers that we just recently received, I was able to sit with her and talk with her, but also receive her medical conditions. And one of her medical conditions was Sjogren's disease, which is an autoimmune disease, and it affects the mucous membranes. The eyes are dry, the nose is dry, the mouth is dry. vaginal cavities are dry. And anyway, one of the things that we discovered with her was her parotid gland. So there's a gland right in front of the ear called the parotid gland, and she had an overgrowth of that parotid gland. And it was probably overgrown to help with the saliva that goes into the mouth. And so that was, after we researched it, 1/3 of the people that have Sjogren's actually do show this. So we were able to show that specifically from her health history.
You know, everybody is different. Everybody creates what we see as that human being. We tell the high school students, you are the architect of your body. You get to decide what you're going to look like at the end of your life. And so with that in mind, every choice that I make when I step on ice, when I get into my car, when I do my job, when I play, it creates different patterns within the body that give me a different look than the person next to me. And as I perform in my life and face obstacles, whether it be nutritional deficits that cause things like stomach ulcers. And if my stomach hurts, I'm going to walk around like this. If my intestines hurts, I'm going to go towards that point of pain. And as we do that, we create muscular structure to support or protect. And that's what presents in the human body. And you can't capture that in books as well as you can when you're looking at the real life cadaver. But that's one of the things that we would like to be able to do, is take the history of a person and match it to that cadaver book.
I came across Peak Research Institute and came and met Bonnie Thompson, and she told me about what Peak Research Institute was trying to do, and that they were kind of in their infancy at the time, and but they'd already been going for a while, and that I was welcome to come in and take a look at what they've got. And so I did that. I came in and was just really, really excited. It's a small environment, very intimate, an opportunity to learn in a small group setting from the cadavers, and then also from the interactions with the other professionals that are in that environment. It was an opportunity to learn from experiences, plus also to have that great intimacy with the cadaver, to know and to understand who this person was, what their medical history was, and ended up feeding me a lot more in the sense of I was able to understand why I saw what I saw in that person, because I was able to correlate it to who they are and what they do in life.
From my experience, my first experience was at Ohio State University, and it was through their med school program, and basically, you know, you walked into a room and there were several cadavers, and again, it was really looking at just anatomy structures, you know, and discussing those, and I felt, wow, this is something that a therapist always wants to know what's underneath the skin. What are we touching? What are we affecting? How are we affecting it? And I think that that's what I really took home. But now, as we're sitting in the living room and talking to a donor that's coming to us, we're able to find out what they liked in life. You know, whether they liked nature, whether they liked otters, you know, what their favorite flower is, and or what religion they are. So we have a cadaver that when we received her, we did a few things that brought her kind of into this space. So we bought a plant that's the exotic angel plant, and we light a candle when we're working on her, and we read a Buddhist sutra that was actually read at her memorial service, and she liked Dolly Parton, so a few of the days that we've been dissecting, we've been listening to Dolly Parton, just kind of in her honor. So just to kind of bring the person into the lab, even though they're not that person anymore, but their physical body is still here, if we can still bring their presence and who they were and what they want us to learn. So when I can ask them, what would you like us to learn from you? And they can say back to me, I want you to understand what radiation does to the brain, because I had radiation of my brain, I had brain cancer. And so if we can look at that and we can see that, but there's so much more we can learn also.
As far as what they would like to research, I would say probably my lungs, because, you know, what does smoking for 55 or 60 years do to your lungs? My heart, because it's a good heart so far, and possibly the bones. I had a hip replacement, a repaired knee. How well did that hold? How well did it bond? How long has that been in there? And look how viable it is, you know. Osteoporosis, you know. Why does it affect all the joints in my upper body, not my lower? All sorts of things that might be viable for research.
I've been to multiple academic anatomy labs, and I've dissected over 100 cadavers myself. And this is a much more comfortable learning environment and is unique amongst all of the environments that I've visited. Every environment treats the cadaver with respect. Here they treat the cadaver with gratitude. And right there, right off the bat, that changes the entire environment around the cadaver. They're a person, they're part of this learning process. And so it just makes it that much more personable. If I was to give my body to science, which I highly recommend, it would be to a place like this. I have a very profoundly spiritual connection to anatomy. I very firmly believe that this body is created and evolved by God, and so in learning anatomy, I am learning more about myself and about my fellow human beings, and it makes me appreciate my faith more and more and more. The more I learn about the body and how beautifully made it is, even down to some of the most simple components, I am in wonder all the time. And so it's almost my other church.
We have created our own donor program, and so we're able to have the information that we feel like we need to be doing the research properly. Because it's one thing to say that I think this guy might have had pain and self-medicated. It's another to say, you know, she was a golfer and that's why she has a big muscle over here, or she was you know, an accountant, that's why her hands, and be able to look at the changes that tissue has to do to be able to accommodate that person, because we are a creature of what we do on a daily basis. One of the reasons that I wanted the lab here is because I have a very good practice, I guess. I see a lot of people. I have a lot of people on the waiting list. I do mainly injury rehabilitation, and when I get stumped in my clinic, I can come over here. I look at the cadaver. I'm able to transfer that information that I get from the cadaver immediately back into my treatment room. So I had a lady that I had been working on that had some sciatica. I was doing a nerve glide, and the very first time, golden, hit it. She comes back and she says, "Bonnie, that was it. Do it again." So I did it again. Didn't work. I did it a third time. Didn't work. Did it a fourth time. Didn't work. Came to the lab, did some dissection on a Saturday by myself, found the split sciatic nerve that we were just talking about, realized that the branches are separate when they're split up at the piriformis, put tension on the nerve, felt it, moved all around, went back in, just tweaked her foot just a little bit to tension the right part of that sciatic nerve. That was it. So the first time I got lucky. The fifth time, I had knowledge, and now I can repeat it. Now I can, when I have somebody I need to do a nerve glide on, I can repeat because I know that there's a possibility that this exists. And that is what makes you, it sets you apart.
Well, as far as the cadaver, I'm no longer there. My spirit is done gone and escaped. You know, it's going places it likes, you know. And that body that I hosted my spirit for however many years, you know, when I go, it's just a shell, you know. It's just a temporary housing, you know. And to keep other housings for living people still well, you know, why don't you look at it, see what's happening inside, you know, or see what you can find out, you know, or see how it can help you, you know. Because at that point, I'm disassociated completely, you know. And if the people that do study me or study that thing, then I'm perfectly fine with it.
So there are some strange parts in our body that we may not really know much about. And the more that I've learned through dissection, there's a particular body part that is kind of exciting to me. And it's called the omentum. And the omentum is a structure that hangs off of our stomach and our liver. And our large intestine, our transverse colon, hangs off the back side of it. And it's full of lymph, it's full of blood, and it's full of fatty tissue. And it hangs on the lower end of it, so it doesn't have any, yeah, it's like an apron, and it doesn't have any anatomical attachments below. And what we have found in the lab anyway, and what they're finding more and more, is that the omentum has to have some immunological function, because if an organ is in distress, then the omentum will wrap itself around that organ and help take away some of that distress. And Bonnie and I had the privilege to go down to Denver University and go to the cadaver lab. And we were there amongst medical students, and we were there to be able to see the abdominal opening. And the abdominal opening was done, and this omentum on this person was tucked down and wrapped around. And so I nudged one of the students and asked them, where's the omentum? And she was like, I wondered where that was. And so we asked the professor in the moment. And she was like, oh, it's just hiding on us, you know, and she starts to dig it out. Well, in our lab, what we would want to do is, what is it wrapped around? Why is it wrapped around? And we'd want to further discover that and know and try to understand what their symptoms were, and is it related to the omentum wrapped around. So to me, there's so much more to discover about the omentum that I'd like to see.
When you're in a class, like if I, for instance, just speaking from a massage therapist, my goal is to figure out what's going on with the muscles. And that is to the exclusion of every other part that's in there. Well, what I've realized is the muscles aren't alone. They're not in there by themselves. When you start looking for the muscle, you realize there's all this other stuff. And at first I would just rip it off and tear it out and throw it in the bucket. And then I realized, oh, I just tore out the nerve. I just tore out a vessel. That fat was protecting something very important in there, and I need to go back and see what its relationship to that muscle is. And so having that realization around other structures in the area, I think sets us apart too, because then I'm able to work not just on the muscle, but how the muscle affects the ability of that nerve to transmit signals. So one of the things that I discovered in doing the dissection is the difference between the layers of muscles and the layers of fascia and their relationship. So 24/7, and especially at night, we're creating new tissue, and new tissue comes in and it's kind of unorganized, but it's coming in there to replace other tissue, and it doesn't really know what it's supposed to do until we get up and move. And when I stretch, I realign that tissue and I give it information, input through that stimulation of what I want it to do. I want you to be a long bicep muscle. But this one over here, I want my back muscles to also be long. So if we don't move, if we don't give that stimulation, that input, then it becomes more dense and it becomes more sticky. And the fluid becomes more viscous. Instead of smooth gliding surface, I now have a rough gliding surface. And now I'm like, I can't move my arm very well. Well, when you used to have shoulder surgery way back, they'd put you in a sling and just leave you there. And then you'd get out and go, why can't I move? Well, that's what happens overnight, but we get up and we put in that information when it's not too sticky, not too dense, and then we create these layers of tissue as they slide, and the fluid becomes more watery so that the movement is easier, and it doesn't take as much energy to move when I have that smooth tissue as if I have what we consider a sticky tissue or tight tissue.
And even our class today that we're having is specific on the nerves in the upper extremity. So where does it travel and what muscles are involved, or what muscles can hang it up or impinge it or be problematic to the nerves.
I am a chiropractor, strength and conditioning coach. My area of expertise is in soft tissue injury and rehabilitation. And over the last 7-8 years, it's been very much going towards and moving more towards a neurological approach to that rehabilitation towards that soft tissue. When we're talking about nerve entrapments, you have two different types of injuries, right? You have injury from acute trauma, so crushing injuries, all right, or some sort of a pull, something that is acute that happened at the moment that has a direct impact on that nerve. And then you also have cumulative trauma, cumulative injury over a long period of time, okay? And unfortunately, most of us that's the injuries that we have now, especially as manual therapists. All of us here see this and we look at this. You go to a lot of doctors and you say, my hand is tingling, where do they go? Your hand, and they diagnose carpal tunnel. When in reality, we could have had carpal tunnel pronator, corticopectoral tunnel scalenes, and then we could have had stenosis at the spinal cord and another thing. At this point, we're going to get out into the lab. I've got some handouts over there with all the structures that we're going to look at, and it's not exhaustive. So bring a pen with you if you need something to write on. If you've got a book or a clipboard, military here. Bring that with you. And during this whole time, we're going to be looking, feeling, touching, and moving. And then we're going to put it all together. Okay? All right. So let's get suited up and go on out. Yeah. There you go. There you go. Okay? So there's the median nerve. So that's where we're going to be going here. Okay? So median nerve coming down into the transverse carpal ligament. Now, the transverse carpal ligament is going across points in the wrist, right? Okay, but it's very high up right here. So the end of the arch of that is right there. So if you pull your hand back, you can feel that hard arch right in there, and it's flanked by those two bones on each side, the pisiform and the process on the near the thumb here, and so that's where that is. A lot of times we work way down too low for the transverse carpal ligament, and it's really right there. Okay, let's see here. This is the ligament itself.